Let's get started. I would first like to introduce myself. My name is Erin Wygant. I work for the San Juan Islands Visitors Bureau, and this is our 13th annual Savor the San Juans, which is our fall celebration of food, farms, and film. We so wish that we could be doing these live tours and tastings with you in person, but we're so glad that you've chosen to join us here on Zoom. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our host for this evening. This is Cole Sission of Doe Bay Wine Company.
Cheers.
Great. Cole has a beautiful bottle shop on Orcas Island, but is currently joining us from the Grand Canyon on his travels.
It's cold out here. Chilly.
Before we get started with our tasting, Cole is going to take us through a food and wine pairing class here. But before we get started, let's take a tour of Doe Bay Wine Company and get to know Cole and his bottle shop a little bit more.
Hello, my name is Cole Sission, and I'm here on Orcas Island in East Sound at Doe Bay Wine Company, which is my bottle shop. I was born and raised in Doe Bay. I was an island kid. I was homeschooled out in the woods, running around. Orcas is one of the most magical places in the whole world. For those of you who haven't been here before, I went to high school on the island. I went to school at the University of Washington afterwards, and I was a political science major, but after a 6-month trip around Europe in my early 20s, backpacking through the great wine regions of Italy and France and Spain, I came home and decided I wanted to be a sommelier. First love is travel. I found that wine was an incredible vehicle that allowed me to open doors wherever I went. I worked down in Las Vegas for a number of years as a sommelier for the Michael Mina restaurant group. Ran the wine program at the Bellagio, suit and tie, lived on the Strip, far cry from the woods of Mount Pickett, Doe Bay. Worked an internship for Bob Betts, Master of Wine out in Woodinville. Just had fun. Really learned my industry. It culminated with the return back to Orcas about 3 years ago. I had been gone almost 18 years, and moving back here, found this little space, opened up the shop, and started carrying beer, wine, sake, cider from all over the world. My past travels, friends of mine, producers I respect and admire, trips to Mexico and Japan and France, kind of running all around. It's really been an incredible adventure for me. We also have a project that I started that's called the Orcas Project, which is a collaboration with different winemakers around Oregon and Washington. We worked with some local artists to see if we could kind of have an animal represent each of the different winemakers. Now there's 11 that we work with. So really kind of fun. It's our house project, our house wine. But there's things from all over the world here. So please visit us if you're ever in East Sound, if you're ever on Orcas Island. I'm really excited to do this little kind of a virtual food and wine exercise pairing with you now. Hopefully you have some wine in front of you. Any questions you have, please let me know. Really want you to feel comfortable and kind of demystify some of the elements here. So wishing you all the best. Let's have some fun, and thanks for tuning in.
That's awesome.
You are awesome. Thanks for doing
hilarious.
it.
Oh, well done. Thank you.
Of course. All right. I'm going to pass it over to you, Cole, to lead us through this food and wine pairing. I'm so excited.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate it. Cheers, everyone. Thank you for joining. I know you're all muted, so you won't be able to pipe up. But I'm on my iPhone here at the Grand Canyon. Arrived with my brother about 3 hours ago. It's chilly. It's cold, but we're on a little tour of national parks. My friend Megan and I started and went through Redwood and Yosemite, and now my brother Herb is with me, and we're Joshua Tree now at the Grand Canyon. We'll go to southern Utah after this. Anyways, hope that you're all doing well. Hope you have some wine in front of you. I think the format here is going to be kind of, it's not going to be quite as interactive. Hopefully the second half will be, but I hope that you have a little wine in front of you, maybe even a little cheese or a little snack of some kind. And we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about, I'm going to give you some kind of broad strokes, brush strokes of how I view, kind of theoretically and practically, how I view food and wine pairing, their interaction. And just kind of some really, really loose guideline in terms of ways that I like to approach my meal, whether I'm eating or whether I'm serving, and kind of go from there. At the end, any questions that you kind of come up with or thoughts, ideas, pairings that you like or dislike, please let me know. Yeah, so, all right. Two components. We have food, we have wine. You spend so much time. We go to these well-known fine dining restaurants and order the chef's tasting menu. It's a splurge. It's a beautiful menu paired 8 courses, 12 courses. There's little bits of wine paired with each dish. It's such a mystery sometimes. We look at this and say, wow, what is this? But how mysterious is it really? I think at the end of the day, food and wine pairing can range a full spectrum from kind of haute cuisine over here, really, really scientific and really thoughtful, all the way to your basic, backyard barbecue or bottle of wine with pizza. Really simple on the other end. Food and wine are something that work really, really well together. I don't think it has to be super fancy. I think sometimes we get into this realm where it's like, wow, that's an incredible pairing. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And there are many like that. There are some really amazing pairings that when we're introduced to these, we say, wow, I can't believe the interaction here. But then there are also a lot of other pairings that are just good food and good wine and good company, and they work really well. So I think that the whole premise today will boil down to, food and wine, there can be some incredible pairings, some delicious, mind-blowing, breathtaking pairings, but there can also be a lot of room in the middle. There can be some disastrous pairings too, some absolutely horrible pairings that, woe are those. But there's a whole bunch of options in the middle. So a couple things. Let's talk about food first. So when we're looking at food, we're looking at different components. The way that we, as let's say wine professional, kind of sommelier, kind of that idea, the way we look at a dish and a wine are we want them to be in sync with one another. So we're looking at kind of this idea of different styles of wine and trying to kind of figure out, is it a light-bodied wine? Is it a medium-bodied wine? Is it a full-bodied wine? And we're looking at the dish and kind of thinking of the same thing. Food has a number of different components. We've got, the different ingredients. We've got salt. We've got fat. We've got all of these different components in food. And then we have the same in wine with tannin and oak and acid and alcohol. So what we're really trying to do, the basic premise of food and wine pairing, is create pairings where there's some level of synergy, something that goes between the two. What we really want to do is we want to have kind of this harmonious interaction between our food and our wine. That's our goal. And how we get there, we can take several different routes. So when we're thinking about a wine, we're oftentimes thinking about either the acid, we're thinking about the sweetness in the wine. Is it sweet or dry? Is the acid high? Is it low? We're thinking about the tannin in the wine. Is it a light-bodied wine with little tannin like a Pinot Noir? Or is it a full-bodied, very tannic wine like a Cabernet? We're also looking at the oak. Is there a lot of oak? Is there a little bit of oak? And also things like the alcohol. Is it a high alcohol wine or a low alcohol wine? These are all aspects. Also fruit. Didn't mention fruit. Is it a really big fruity wine, or is it an earthy wine from somewhere in Europe perhaps? So we're kind of thinking about these different levels. When we're looking at a dish, as I mentioned, we're thinking about fat, we're thinking about acid, we're thinking about salt. And how do we pair the wine with the food in this context? So one of the things we think about with wine in general is some of the easier wines to pair with food, or wines that have higher levels of acidity, kind of the brighter, fresher styles. So we have these wines that, for example, it's probably easier in many forms to pair a high acid, bright, fresh, light wine with a number of dishes. The one important component of this is you don't want either the wine or the food to crush or overpower the other one. You think about pairing a big, ripe, rich California Cabernet with something, oysters or crab or endive or something delicate and light. You're never going to taste the flavors of that delicate dish with that high-powered intensity of the Cabernet. In the same fashion, if you take a very light-bodied, a Pinot Grigio, a Gruner Veltlin or something like that, and pair it with a big lamb chop, or a foie gras or something rich or heavy, you're going to completely overpower the wine. So really what you're looking for is some kind of kind of balance there. I think balance is the key for any of these. So, you know, one of the things that I look for kind of right off the bat is the weight of a dish. So if I'm just, let's say I'm in the kitchen, I'm cooking a dinner, and I'm thinking about a wine to pair with this. One of the first things I think about is, what is the dish weight? Is it a heavy dish? Is it a light dish? Where does it fall in that range? Ideally, I'm going to look for a wine that is in that same level. If it's a light, kind of a fresh, let's say ceviche, a light seafood ceviche dish, I'm probably going to look for a light, fresh Vino Verde, Albarino, or Sauvignon Blanc. If it's something that's big and rich, let's say a seafood like, you know, lobster or crab bisque or something like that with a little more weight, maybe a beurre blanc, a butter sauce, I'm going to look for a little bit richer or more heavier wine, I guess you'd say. That's one way you can look at it. Another, that's what we call a complementary approach. If we're pairing, like, that's a big Cabernet with a steak, it's a very complementary pairing. Big wine, big ingredient. Those work very well together. There are other times where you might use acidity in the wine to kind of cut through the richness of a dish. For example, if you looked at that, you know, the crab bisque, perhaps a Sauvignon Blanc with that, even though it's a little bit lighter, would kind of be zippy and fresh and clean. So that's another kind of way you can kind of look at it. Cooking methods, is it braised? Is it grilled? You know, you think about the influence of smoke from a grill. You think about a long braised roast. You know, those are both perhaps beef, but very, very different. You might want something a little bit lighter and softer with the braised beef, whereas you might want something a little bit more powerful, a big Zinfandel or Cabernet with your charred grilled meat. Another thing that we also look at sometimes is the sauce and the condiments. You know, when we're thinking about a dish in general, oftentimes the temptation is to pair with the protein. You know, let's say like a scallop dish. You know, you have some pan-seared scallops. You might think, oh, we're going to pair with the scallops. But then you might realize that you have some kind of like tropical fruit salsa around the outside. And you might look at that and say, okay, I've got mango and some pineapple. You know, maybe we pair with the tropical notes of that dish instead. You know, maybe you want to really look at these side dishes. We do a lot of that in Thanksgiving. You know, you think about a smorgasbord of food on the table, and what you really want to do is kind of, it's really challenging to find a wine that pairs with all of those ingredients. And instead of trying to pair with the turkey or the ham, you might look at pairing with just kind of a wide variety of the different dishes on the side.
Yeah, Cole, I want to interject there because that was a question that I had. We're, you know, coming up on the holidays here. We've got Halloween first, so I was curious if you have any suggestions for wine and chocolate pairings, how to go about that. But then moving forward, right, going into Thanksgiving and then in Christmas, are there some that you prefer? You gave us a list of 4 beautiful wines from the Orchis Project, and I'm curious if any of those would be great for the holidays, or how you recommend us tackling our food and wine pairings over the holidays.
You know, for the holidays, for those large feasts, I like to try to come up with a couple different bottles of like just different styles of wine. I think that's one of the most fun times to kind of practice. You talk about theory, but actually practice food and wine pairing is when you're at a table with all these different ingredients. I often like to bring a couple different styles from different places. A light-bodied, just like we set up today, a light-bodied sparkling, dry sparkling, light-bodied white, light-bodied red, full-bodied red. Like, you can hit almost every aspect of your table in that form if you want to. It allows you to really have versatility. So I really like diversity at a table. It's easy to just bring a bunch of Caps or a bunch of Zins or a bunch of Malbecs or something of that nature, and those are great wines. But you really need to have something that's a little bit lighter and fresher as well. And also with Thanksgiving and Christmas, with the richness of the dishes, I think that it's one of those things that it becomes one of those things where you have the richness and, you know, you really want a lighter, fresher, kind of just something zippy, right? Because you're going to be eating marshmallow and candied yams and mashed potatoes and all of these rich, buttery rolls. You know, you'd like something that can kind of cleanse your palate. I love sparkling wine on the holidays, and I think everybody does, right? But it's one of those, sparkling wine is so versatile because it allows you to have kind of, you take a bite of something, you have a sip of the sparkling wine, and it completely refreshes your palate. It allows you to have this really, really kind of fresh, clean note between bites. But that's, yeah, I mean, there's no wrong answer to that. I think one of the ideas here also is kind of drinking what you like and eating what you like. We spend a lot of time looking for these perfect pairings, and they're out there. But oftentimes, if you have a table full of food that you enjoy and a table full of wine that you enjoy, you'll find a pairing that makes sense. Is that clear, or was that just kind of...
No, that makes perfect sense. I want to remind people to please use the chat function if you also have any questions. And we're coming up here on the final 10 minutes of our class. So if you would like to unmute yourselves and ask any questions to Cole, feel free to do so. I know, time flies when you're talking about wine.
All right, can I touch on some things real fast then?
Absolutely.
All right, so a couple things. With wine in general, what I also look at is regional aspects. So when I'm thinking about what I'm pairing with a dish, if I'm having Italian food, I normally go Italy. If I'm having French food, I normally go France. Having a big pasta dish, I'm looking at a Tuscan wine. So that's normally, if you think about where these wines, and also with cheese, if you have a cheese from northern Spain, get a wine from northern Spain. Get a wine from the same region, the same province. Same in the south of France. Look for wines or cheeses from Avignon in Provence area if you're drinking a Chateauneuf de Pape or Gigondas or something like that. I think that, with dessert, sweet wines, always try to go sweeter on the wine than the dessert itself. It will really help. Some people serve dry wine with chocolate cake and brownies, and wine and chocolate can be really hard. But go with a sweeter wine if you can, old Zinfandel with residual sugar, or even dessert wines when you're eating, I think, sweet foods in general. I don't know. There are other things too, but all right, Aaron, let's do it. What's next?
Oh no, that's great. These are the kind of insight tips that I'm looking for. You mentioned cheese briefly, and I was curious because I know at your bottle shop you have charcuterie boards, and I was curious, what are your go-to snacks while grazing and drinking wine? What is on your platter that you serve to people, whether personally or in the shop? I'm curious, what are the must-haves on that charcuterie board?
All right, so right now, to be honest, we have a little cheese club we started with little portions of cheeses each month, but because of kind of all that's going on, we've kind of put the charcuterie a little bit on hiatus for the time being. But in a normal setting, I want to have diversity. The normal idea would be I want to have less of more. I want to have little bits of cheeses from different areas, a little bit of charcuterie, a little bit of salami, just kind of a wide breadth, if you will. I really like to put cheeses from different countries. I think we always have a Dutch cheese, a Spanish cheese, an Italian cheese, a French cheese. Try to kind of keep it so it's interesting. You want also different milk, whether it's sheep or cow or goat or mixed. I like that as well. I think that's kind of one of the keys to me. I love hazelnuts and like salted almonds. I love dried figs. I eat quite a bit of those. I mean, olives, all the basic snacks. The thing about the cheese and charcuterie program is I basically bring it in the shop so that I can take it home and snack on it. And if there's like half, there's never any profit there. It's always like half for me and half for anybody else who orders it. But there's always a selection of all kinds of tasty treats.
We have a question coming in from the chat room here asking what your favorite palate cleanser is. How do you go from wine to wine, and what's your palate cleanser?
Champagne. No, I'm just kidding.
I try it.
No. It's it depends. I mean, we've played around with that in taste tests before. Crackers is a pretty easy one to just go to. It's something that you can just kind of have a little crackers or I like roll, like a white, something like a little bit of bread. For me, that's a little bit easier to kind of like tame the tannin on the palate. But I like nuts too. I know that's a super palate cleanser, but like a little bit of like just a dried almond or something of that nature. I think that's kind of where I'm at.
Great. We have another question coming in from the chat asking how you got interested in wines, and a little bit of, can you share with us your background in wine?
I feel like the video did a pretty good job. I don't know. I was the catalyst was a trip to Europe, as I mentioned, when I was 22. I took a year off of school and basically backpacked all around Europe. And I had worked in restaurants prior to that. That was my background. And I never considered a career in restaurants or the hospitality industry in general. I was a poli-sci major, but after seeing how revered it was around Europe and just how diverse and incredibly broad and interesting, I came back home and immediately started studying and reading books. And for me, it was all about lifestyle. It kind of always has been. I really wanted to have a fun life where I could eat and drink and enjoy myself. And yeah, so I think that there's so many rabbit holes you can run down in this industry. And I think people just kind of look at it sometimes and it's restaurants or wine or food pairing or like, but there are so many aspects, whether it's geography or history or language, science. I mean, there's so many aspects that are really interesting. So that was kind of how I got into it. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. I thought that it would be a great vehicle that would allow me to do that. And I've been running with it ever since, except for now I'm back home in Orcas, but I still travel. So.
Yeah, as evidenced by the fact that you're joining us from the Grand Canyon right now.
Yeah, this is kind of fun. This is, we'll see what happens. We've been playing around a little bit down here with different pairings and just kind of playing around. So we'll see.
I would like to take this opportunity to ask anyone that has questions. Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask Cole. He's a wealth of information. So please feel free to unmute and ask your questions.
I just have two little questions to what you said. One was for heavier fish, you are using what, Zipsy or something? I understood Zipsy. I don't know what you said.
So for heavier fish, it kind of depends. I mean, if we're talking, fishy fish like mackerel or something like that. But for heavier fish, let's say even halibut or a salmon, I can use either way. If it's grilled and I'm putting it on the grill and there's any kind of smoke or char, I often go light-bodied red or even medium-bodied red. But if it's something that I'm just pan-searing it or putting a sauce around it, I'm probably going to go with a more full-bodied white. What I said there is you could contrast it. You can cut through. Another thing depends on the sauce, right? So if there's like a blackberry coulis with your salmon, your grilled salmon, I'm probably going to want a Pinot Noir or Syrah or Grenache, something like that. But if there's a very light preparation, perhaps I'd want to contrast it. Instead of complementing the richness of the fish in the body, maybe I want to cut right through it with an Albarino or something of that nature. But a lot of it kind of depends on how you're cooking it. Are you baking it? Is there any smoke or char? And then also, what kind of sauce? Is there a sauce of any kind with it? The more lemon you put on it, the more I veer in a white direction. The more of like a darker, if there's a dark fruit component or anything like that, the more I'd probably veer in a red direction. But you want to be careful with the reds. What you're really looking for with the red in fish is you don't want a tannic wine. You really want to stay away from heavy wines, especially those with tannin like a Cabernet or even some Merlot and some Syrah. You're really looking for a juicy red wine that has that, maybe that bright acidity, but doesn't have a lot of alcohol. Because if you have alcohol and tannin, you're going to overpower the fish no matter how it's cooked or what the sauce is. So I'm probably sitting in that more full-bodied white to lighter-bodied red.
And the other question was, you said earthy European. Do you think overall that European wines are more earthy than Americans, or what's the thing about earthy?
So I think that overall, European wines in general tend to have a little bit lower alcohol. They have a little bit higher acidity, a little bit less oak, and this is a generalization. But oftentimes European wines are a little bit more, we say, food friendly. Not to diss all American wines by any extent, but there's oftentimes a level, when we say the earth or the minerality of French, Spanish, Italian wines that can be a little more complementary, especially if there's an earth component in the dish itself. So there is a level of kind of, we talk about, kind of the minerality in Chablis with oysters or something along that line. So yeah, I think that oftentimes as a wine professional, I can find it easier because things like a lot of alcohol, a lot of oak, a lot of tannin, unless it's a big steak, oftentimes get in the way and can really drown a dish. So the European wine styles in general tend to kind of be more medium in style. So oftentimes I do look to those, unless it's, for example, a big ripe barbecue. I'm gonna have a big, barbecue sauce ribs. There's nothing quite like a big bottle of Zinfandel or something along those lines, like prototype of a New World wine to really kind of, to pair with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Cole, we have a question from the chat asking, what are some of the wines that you've taken on your trip this month? Which I think is a great question.
Oh man, what are some of the wines? Well, I've got a whole host of Orcas Project wines I brought down just for this. I wasn't sure how it was going to go. So my brother and I are sipping a little Orcas Project Pinot Noir right now as it hits about 28 or 26. Just kidding. I brought a wide range. So there's a little Spanish Reserva in the box that I have in front of me. There's a little bit of Beaujolais from Morgan. We've had some Italian wine earlier in the trip. We've had some French wine. Kind of like I view Thanksgiving. You know, I really appreciate diversity of drinking tastes. And I brought kind of a wine for each different occasion. I didn't know it was going to be so cold. If I had known it was going to be so cold down here, I would have brought more full-bodied heavy full-bodied heavy wines in general, mostly reds. I tend to drink very seasonally. In the summers, in the springs, I drink a lot of white and sparkling and rosé. As we move towards the fall, I drink a lot more medium-bodied, light-bodied reds. Once it gets cold in the winter, I drink a much more full-bodied reds. That's kind of a more warm welcome for me. But yeah, I got a little smorgasbord, kind of a little fun selection here. I might have to augment it shortly as it's going quick.
Cole, I was wondering if you would tell us a little bit about your wine club. You mentioned the cheese program, but I was hoping you would tell us about how we can get your wines wherever we are, you know, your shipping, a little bit about how to find you, that sort of thing.
It's so complicated. You'd think it'd be easier. So right now we have a wine club, but it's kind of we run it through the shop, and it's just basically we send offers out usually around twice a month, and it's an opt-in. So basically we have a couple different tiers, but right now it's basically an email is sent out, and if you want to buy any of the wine, purchase any of the wines, then you can go ahead and do so, and we'll just go ahead and have it pick up, or we can ship it to you. Normally they're wines. For example, we were in the Willamette Valley earlier 2 weeks ago, I guess. We were in Napa Valley last week. Most of the wines we offer are friends of ours, winemakers we know, importers, distributors. We kind of really try to leverage our experience and really support people that we like. So it's kind of like me. It's all over the place, but it's a really interesting, fun way for you to try different wines. The whole goal, the original setup was that you would be able to pick and choose wines that you like. I think in the future, we'll go ahead and move it more towards 6 bottles a month or something of that nature, just to take the choices down a bit and really curate it. But you can go to doebaywinecompany.com and you can sign up there. Or you can send me an email, cole@doebaywinecompany.com, and I'd be happy to help you out. Also, any questions about dishes? I get all kinds of texts and emails all the time from friends who are at supermarkets. They're out shopping for dinner. Like, what wine can I send you a picture? And I'll be like, okay, what are you eating? What are you drinking? You know. So yeah, any questions that you're welcome to send to me.
That's good to know. We have a question coming in from the chat asking what some of your favorite wineries from the Willamette Valley are.
You know, we covered a couple of them this last week. My friend Megan and I were down. We visited a number of different wineries, and we were at Division Winemaking Company up in Portland. Tom and Kate are the owners there. That's kind of a fun one for those of you who are traveling through I-5 or down and haven't yet been to wine country, because they have a really cool urban winery. So that's Division Winemaking Company on Division Street in Portland. Really fun little spot. It's a little different now with COVID. I'm not sure how tasting rooms are all operating. Who else do we visit this trip? We visited Brickhouse Winery down in Newburgh. Doug Tennell. Brickhouse does a great job. I've always liked the wines from Soder. I think that Soder does a really nice job. Chehalem, kind of an old classic. And then Antiquo and Farm, we were there down near Eugene in Junction City. And that place is incredible. Biodynamic farm, really amazing wines. They just started coming to Washington. But they're really wonderful as well. We stopped by Iris Vineyards down near Eugene. They do a good job. Yeah, there's a ton. Again, I'm happy to send a small list because the number of wineries, the proliferation of wineries in the Willamette Valley is honestly overwhelming, both for professionals and everyone else. But I have a couple of lists that I put together that I'd be happy to send.
Cool. That's something that has always struck me about you is your support for fellow winemakers within your industry. It's evident in your bottle shop and the wine variety of sake, ciders, wines. You are so in tune to the industry, and I think that's something that is really rare to find, especially in the islands where we get, one of everything. You're so good at broadening the horizons, and I'm think you are a huge wealth of knowledge for us on the islands here, and thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much. I mean, the whole goal in the shop is always been and will continue to be to basically have all the shelves be full of sake, wine, beer of places that we visited and that we've been to before, and who we know the people who make or run that operation. And as we chip away, you know, the sake trips to Japan and constant trips to Europe, it becomes one of those where it's really cool to be able to pick a bottle of wine off the shelf and say, okay, let me tell you a story. And I think that's really fun. And with support, I mean, industry's small, you know, life is short. It becomes one of those things where this is a unique position to be able to support those that have supported you in the past, and also those people that you like. Because you can buy, there's thousands of wines, there's thousands of bottles that I can offer to sell you. But it becomes one of those things where I think that you take care of people that you like, good people in the world. And thanks. I'm glad you noticed and appreciate. I that's one of the most fun aspects of this, is the constant ability to take care of your friends, and also to introduce new wines and new products to people. So I'm still having fun after all these years.
Great, good to hear. At this time, if there's anyone that would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, feel free to do so. A half hour sure goes by fast when you're sipping wine.
Yeah.
Any questions? If not, we will say thank you and goodbye to Cole to let him continue gallivanting around the Grand Canyon.
I just
Off
want
I
to
go.
say, here's to you, Cole and Erin, for doing a wonderful job with Savor the San Juans and all these wonderful virtual tours. And Cole, you're such an asset to the islands and so generous and always sharing. So thank you so much. And Erin, you've done a great job.
I'm gonna miss
kudos.
it. I've been touring farms and cooking and wine tasting all through October. It's been so fun. So thank you to all of you who have joined us for multiple events, some of you for every single event. It's so appreciated. We definitely miss you up in the islands this year. And I'm hopeful that when COVID is a thing of the past, we can all drink together and cook together and tour farms together soon.
Great job, Aaron. Great job, Barbara. Great job, you guys. You've really done a really good job. I know how hard this year has been, so well done.
Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you,
Well,
and enjoy the canyon.
yeah.
I got to find my trusty mule. We'll be good. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you all tuning in tonight, and thank you for your time and energy and having me here. And please, any further questions, just send me emails, and I'm happy to help out.
That was great.
Cheers.
All right.
Cheers,
Cheers.
guys.
Thanks,
Cheers,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you very much. See y'all soon.
Bye.
Take care.